Hey, what's happening, y'all? I'm amazed how Mage build packs so much power in Elden Ring. It's crazy. I've always played with physical builds, and I gotta tell you that this Mage build has everything you could ask for in any build. You got a trick on your sleeve for every combat situation. It can kill up close, it can kite and down enemies at mid-range, you can AoE, you can snipe a long distance, and you can burn enemies like it was a bleed build. It's the most versatile build of them all, so check it out how to set it up and how to play it to be the most powerful mage or witch in Elden Ring.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
Quick shout out to our sponsor AOE.com. If you don't have the time to grind for runes or items in Elden Ring and need them real fast, use my code BAL for 3% off. Now let's get back to the video. You guys remember that I said that bleed builds were the best in Elden Ring? Well, intelligence builds are not that far behind in terms of raw damage that they can put out, killing enemies and burning bosses. What I'm amazed is the versatility of this build, relying on sorcery for every type of situation. So it kind of covers everything on a checklist. Close combat, check. Mid-range attack, check. Long range attacks, check. AoE attack, check. And the most important of them all, boss fight, check. With this build, boss fights are that easy. It's like the bleed builds that can down mini bosses and big bosses in literally just seconds, relying on 3 spells: Terra Magica, Renalis Full Moon, and Comet Azure. There are a whole bunch of other sorceries or spells that I tested, but those 3 were the most fun and the ones that I was most comfortable with. Sure, you can play this build with a staff and a shield, or a staff and a sword like a battle mage, but using double staff allow to stack the benefit of the offhand staff to your sorceries. So for example, if we use the Carian Regal Scepter in the offhand, and that staff enhances full moon sorceries, and then use Renalis Full Moon spell with a better magic scaling staff on the main hand, it will deal more damage than if we use the Carian Regal Scepter by itself. This build uses that dual staff combination to get the most out of certain sorceries that will make you even more powerful. I will explain what staff combination you need to use on what situation when I talk about how to play the build in just a moment. Last thing to note is that it focuses heavily on sorceries and damage, and we are not going to invest any points in strength, so the armor that it uses is very light, making this build a little bit squishy. Some of you will know the term as glass cannon, but if you learn how to play it effectively and avoid dangerous situations, you'll be fine, and you can cruise on all the maps in the game. Now let's look at the attributes that you will need to create this insane mage build. The main attribute for this build is of course intelligence, because the attribute scaling on the staff that this build has have S scaling and will allow to cast a variety of sorceries. Our secondary attributes are vigor, to have a big HP pool since we're squishy, and mind, to have a big focus point pool to cast a lot of sorceries, and then dexterity, because dexterity can help with the speed of spell casting. We want to get quickly as we can to the sorcery scaling of 60-80, and that will happen at level 100 and more. So for level 50, you want to have vigor around 20, mind around 20, intelligence around 35. You want to focus on intelligence first. Put some points in dexterity if you need to meet some requirements for a weapon. Now for level 100, you want vigor around 35 and mind around 30, or you can have vigor at 40 and mind at 25. Depends what you feel more comfortable with, or you need more FP for your sorceries. And intelligence at 60 for the first soft cap of sorcery scaling. Now for level 150, you want vigor around 50 and mind around 45. And again, you can switch them to 45 and 50, or even 55 vigor and 40 mind. It's up to you how you want to play it, if you need more HP or FP, or you want them balanced. And intelligence at 80. That's the second soft cap of sorcery scaling. For level 200, and that's the level of my Wicked Witch of the West, I got 60 vigor, 60 mind, and 80 intelligence, and 34 dexterity. And after that, over 200, you want to put more points in dexterity to have more speed while casting. This is where it gets interesting, and you will see the combination of staff that I'm using on this build. So the main weapon is Lusat's Glintstone Staff, because it has an S intelligence scaling at max level, and has the highest sorcery scaling for the sorceries that we're gonna use. Also enhances the power of all sorceries, but consumes additional FP. That's why we need a high FP pool and a talisman that decreases FP usage. This staff is located at Celia Town of Sorcery in Caelid, in a chest north of the Nox Sorceress and Nox Priest boss chamber, after you defeat them both. This is a staff that we're gonna use on the main hand, and the one you have to use to cast all your spells to get that innate sorcery scaling, and having as well the benefits of the offhand staff, and those are: first, the Carrion Glintstone Staff with S intelligence scale at max level. This staff boosts Carrion Sword sorcery. That means that our sword sorcery for damage up close will be boosted by 15%. Remember that you need to cast the sword spells with the Lusat Glintstone, having the Carrion Glintstone Staff on your offhand. It's located on a dead body in Carrion Study Hall in Luria of the Lakes. The second staff that we're going to use is Carrion Regal Scepter, that has S intelligence scaling as well at max level, and boost Full Moon sorcery, meaning that our Renala's Full Moon sorcery will be boosted by the staff. Remember that you need to cast the Full Moon with the Lusat Glintstone Staff, having the Carrion Regal Scepter on your offhand. You can obtain it by unlocking the Remembrance of the Full Moon Queen at Round Table Hold after beating Renala, the boss of Luria of the Lake map. And lastly, the Meteorite Staff that boosts gravity sorcery spells, only if you need to deal physical damage as a mage. Some bosses like Renala are extremely hard for a mage, and having a physical damage spell like Rock Sling, for example, can come very handy. Remember that you need to cast any gravity sorcery with the Lusat Glintstone Staff, having the Meteorite Staff on your offhand. It can be found in Caelid in the Street of Sages ruins. It's in a small room with a dead body around some poison flowers. And the last of the weapons will be a small weight dagger that we will infuse the Golden Bow Ash of War to buff before any challenging encounters or boss fight. For the armor, I wanted to resemble the Wicked Witch of the West to get the the Elden Ring in fashion.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too.
And the best one was to use the Balrogx set. Well, I'm using Balrogx's pointed hat, the robe, and the bracers. They can be found in the main hall of the Fortified Manor in Lanedale Royal Capital. It's the first floor side of Grace. And the pants that I'm using are the box greaves. The talismans for this build are Primal Glintstone Blade that reduces all spell costs by 25%. Remember that I said that we needed a talisman to reduce the FP cost because the Lusat uses a lot more FP, so the cost of spell will be up by 25%, but it will reduce the max health by 15%. It can be found in Stargazer's Ruin in Mountaintops of the Giants, in a chest in an underground area where you have to summon your spirit jellyfish to unlock the seal. Next is the Graven Mass Talisman that will boost sorcery damage by 8%. It can be found in a chest atop the Albinaric Rise in the east of the Consecrated Snowfield in the Mountaintops of the Giants. It's in the tower that you require imps to fight each other. A quick note here that if you don't have trouble or you don't mind having that increased cost of FP on your sorceries and want more damage, you can switch your Primal Glintstone Blade Talisman with the Graven School Talisman. And both Grave Talisman, the School, and the Mass will add each other for a total of 12% sorcery damage buff. Next is the Godfrey icon that will increase the damage of charged spells by 15%. We have this talisman especially for the spell Glintstone Comet Shard, and to me that's the utility spell to get enemies from a distance and finish bosses out if needed. And the last talisman, and the most annoying talisman to get in the game, is the Magic Scorpion Charm, that it will increase magic attack power by 12% and increase the damage staking by 10%. It can be obtained during Preceptor Salubi's questline up until the part that you give the Amber Starlight when he tells you about his scheme. It's a pain to get it because it's a long questline and you have to travel a lot, but it's worth it because it adds great damage and stacks with all other talisman and the Physiques Flask tier. So for the Physiques Flask, We have Magic Shrouding Crack Tier that will increase magic attacks by a whopping 20% during 3 minutes. It can be found by defeating the Earth Tree avatar in their minor Earth Tree in Liurna of the Lakes. And the next tier is the Cerulean Hidden Tier that will make you not spend any focus point when you cast magic by 15 seconds. They fixed the duration in the recent hotfix 1.04.1. This tier will come in handy as an opener for any boss fight. We are not using any incantation with this build, only Golden Vow infused as an Ash of War on a dagger to buff ourselves before any challenging or boss fight, or whenever you like. Increases damage by 12.5% and all damage negation by 7.5% by 45 seconds. It's dropped in Lingrave by a Mountain Godric Knight southwest above the Death Touch Catacombs. Instead, we're going to use 6 spells that will be useful for every time in a combat situation. First one is Carrion Greatsword that creates a magic greatsword with great reach and can be cast repeatedly. Can be purchased from the Turtle Muriel, Pastor of Vows at the Church of Vows. Next is the Carrion Phalanx that creates a defensive arch of swords that will follow around the character and will help while doing close combat and damage to enemy stands. Word of advice that it will break when coming into contact with walls or any part of the map. Next is the Glintstone Comet Shard, the most utility spell that this build has, that fires a comet that can be charged for greater damage around 20-25% and leaves a magical line trail that can kill enemies if they align perfectly. It can be cast repeatedly and in motion, even riding the horse. It can be purchased from Sorceress Selene after you deliver her the Conspectus Scroll. Next on our list is Terra Magica, and one of my favorites. It creates a sigil on the ground. You will increase magic damage by 35%, that's huge, and lasts 30 seconds. It can be found on a chest finishing the Academy Crystal Cave in Liurna of the Lake and taking the elevator on the boss area. Next is Renala's Full Moon that creates an actual full moon and launches it forward with great reach. Also dispels all sorcery that comes in touch with it and reduces magic damage negation temporarily by 10%. It can be attained when beating Renala's boss in Liurna of the Lakes and unlocking the remembrance of the Full Moon's Queen in Round Table Hold. Finally, the Comet Azure. That's the spell that will launch a big comet in a straight line. Requires 60 intelligence, and it feels like it's a charged spell, but it's not. And when used, the comet will stay fixed. So if the target moves, you won't hit it. You can obtain it in Hermit Village in Mount Gelmir from Primeval Sorcerer Azure near the cliffs. Now let's see how we can use all of this. The weapons, the spells with Talisman and Physics Flags, all of that to make this build really versatile and powerful in every combat situation. So I said earlier that for every situation there is a combination of staff and spell. Your main hand staff is always going to be Lusat's Glintstone Staff, and you will be alternating the offhand depending on what combat situations you are in. When you are in close combat, you can use as an offhand the Carrion Glintstone Staff and the spells Carrion Greatsword and Carrion Phalanx. The Carrion Greatsword has a medium arc that can hit a couple of enemies at the same time, and Carrion Phalanx will help you out as well. You have to time the Carrion Greatsword pretty well because the spell takes a little time to do the swing. For mid-range and long-range attacks, it won't matter which offhand you have. I always keep the Carrion Glintstone Staff in case I have to finish with close combat. So the spell you're going to use is the Glintstone Comet Shard that has a long range reach and can be charged for more damage, taking advantage of the Godfrey icon Talisman, making this spell the utility spell of this build. You can actually kill enemies with only this spell. And finally, there's the boss fights that I like to do a little sequence when I face them. First, you buff with Golden Vow with the dagger, then you cast Terra Magica spell, then you use the Physics Flask to increase the spell damage and make all spells have 0 cost by 15 seconds. That way, the next 2 spells that we're going to use won't cost any FP. Now, using the Carrion Regal Scepter in the offhand, the upper spell is the Renala's Full Moon, and then we cast Comet Azure while the full moon is on the way to hit. Remember that you want to start hitting Comet Azure when the boss is not moving, because if it does, you won't be able to hit it with it. And if by any chance the boss moves or still have a few health left, you can finish it off with the Glintstone Comet Shard. Remember always to swap the offhand staff for the appropriate spell, and always casting from your main hand that has a better scaling. So after trying bleed builds and setting the bar so high, I wasn't expecting to get even close to the damage they put out. But the versatility and power of this caster build proved me wrong. It packs a lot of damage, and you will kill every enemy on every combat situation if you play it right. The only downside is that a caster is very squishy because it doesn't use any heavy armor. But the versatility and the mid to long range capabilities and the ability to burn bosses compensate for that. So I will say that this build is very on par with a bleed build. So if you have not played with the caster build, I recommend you do it now. And the good part is that you'll still have a long list of spells that you can try and use. So guys, I hope this guide was helpful to you, understanding a little bit more of intelligence build and the properties of staff combinations, and how to make the most out of a few spells that can put out a lot of damage. Again, thank you guys for watching. Give it a like to have YouTube share this video to more people. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Do not miss any builds in the future. As always, be safe and see you on the next one. Ciao!